Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome back to WatchBox, and thanks for logging on. As ever, all you see here is for sale. Reach out to tmosso at thewatchbox.com for purchase and pricing details, accessories, and condition of any watch you see on this show. And we are buying, looking to build our inventory for spring. Sell us a watch, sell us an entire collection. Instant cash transfer, no upper limit on value paid. And if you wish to sell a watch or just receive a quote, reach out to tmosso at thewatchbox.com. All right, let's get started with what can only be described as a big piece, and I cannot overemphasize we have one of these. This is the 2021 50-piece steel DLC H. Moser & C Swiss Alp watch final upgrade. 50 pieces made for the year. It is the latest version of the irreverent send-up on the popular smartwatch built by H. Moser & C of Schaffhausen, Switzerland. Of course, it's minimalist. Of course, it employs copious quantities of ultra-dark Vanta Black. And of course, it finds yet another way to rib Apple. The Swiss Alp watch, entirely mechanical and beautifully handmade, is a gorgeous presence on the wrist. Let's throw it on my 16 centimeter circumference wrist. The watch is 10.3 millimeters thick. It's about 51 millimeters lug to lug, and it's 38.2 millimeters from side to side. That is 9 o'clock to 3 o'clock. A lovely and animated look on the wrist. You can see that the slowly developing upgrade scroll at the base of the dial doubles as the sub-seconds. A handsome and, one must say, jolly take on high horology. This is a watch that offers you real mechanical watchmaking at the highest level. HMC 324 manufacture movement, both sized and shaped for the case. You can see that it's beautifully decorated and also impressively spec'd. It's actually a complication as the power reserve indicator is hidden on the case back. Now it beats away at a very pocket watch like 18,000 vibrations per hour. So while the look may be high tech, the spec is anything but. Old school Swiss lever escapement in 14 karat gold, which reduces friction and extends power reserve. This is actually a 4-day manual wind power reserve. Free sprung balance with a full bridge for shock resistance. You can also see it uses a handmade overcoil hairspring for concentric beating of the hairspring in any position. Moser, of course, makes not only its own movements, but also its own hairsprings, escapements, and balances at its precision engineering subsidiary. Take a quick look at the buckle, which is black DLC just like the case, and note the attention to detail as the buckle itself is primarily satinated, and then the pin within the buckle is of high polish. Clever, handsome, rare. This has always been one of the scarcest annual output watches from Moser, which overall only makes 1,500 watches a year. Now, I've often said that H. Moser & C is the German-Swiss FP Journe. We're going to jump to the opposite end of the country here from the east to the west, and this is what FP Journe does best. Unusual, imaginative, historical references, and this is the Octa Zodiac, a timepiece built from 2003 to 2005, 150 pieces total in platinum with a ruthenium gray dial and a Zodiac calendar. The 40mm watch was considered large by the standards of 2003 FP Journe. We'll throw it on my wrist and then we'll break it down and take a look at the front and the back. As you can see, though the watch appears to be part of the ruthenium series, it's actually its own separate model, a standalone designed to evoke the popular Renaissance clocks and later late Renaissance calendar pocket watches. It's a good-looking timepiece that's got more of a, I would say, a techno-industrial vibe to it than an average Journe platinum piece because of that gray anthracite dial. Now, what really sets this watch apart is the Zodiac calendar complication. And you can see, as you scroll through the days with the quick set date, the Zodiac calendar, which indicates the present Zodiac cycle at 12 o'clock, it slowly revolves around the center dial. This is considered to be something of a blue chip Journe collectible because it was such a rare piece with only 50 made for 3 consecutive model years. Now, you've got the 120-hour indicated power reserve, but the fact is this movement will run for almost 7 days, 160 hours. I mentioned this being a blue chip collectible, not just because it is a rare limited edition, but because it is part of the much sought and valued brass movement era of FP Journe. So you have a lovely brass movement with a rose gold rotor. After mid-2004, this would have been switched over to 18 karat gold, and while gold on a commodity basis is worth more than brass, it's not worth more as a collectible because these are rare, and the rose gold movements are still in production. Of course, this is also a French-made Eleanor case from 1983 to mid-2008. Journe cases were made outside of Paris. You can see the maker's mark of Eleanor right there, and then the French precious metal hallmarks adjacent. Of course, you have Swiss adjacent to the opposite side of the PT950 signature, and this is a tradition that was, of course, established early on, a 1 or 2 letter reference. This is quite simply known as the FP Journe Z. Beautifully made inside and out with a distinctive and memorable dial. This is one of the best collectible FP Journe timepieces to own. So let's talk about a watch from Moser that's very different from what we've just seen here. Launched for 2020, this is the Swiss Mad Red H. Moser & C Pioneer Center Seconds. Now, you're used to seeing these watches on straps, but this example has the rare H. Moser & C factory integrated bracelet. So the watch is steel, the bracelet's steel, the clasp is steel, and as you can see, the watch features evacuated and coined case flanks, and the edges of the buckle echo that design. There is a push-button slider that gives you incremental adjustability via a rack and lock system. You do have quite a bit, approximately 1 centimeter of incremental adjustment. As you'll note, on both sides, every single link removable, so you're gonna get the right size. It's 42.8 millimeters. We're gonna throw it on my wrist, maybe pull the camera out a little bit, because this is a big sports watch. Not a huge sports watch though. As you can see across my wrist, the fit's nice and compact. The lugs are relatively sharp in their downturn, which means even if your wrist is about 15 centimeters circumference, you're going to wear this one well. You can see a lot of the thickness comes from the domed profile of the sapphire. The watch itself isn't that thick, and it will slide underneath the jacket cuff. You can see it's almost ready to slide underneath my shirt cuff. Automatic winding with a 3-day power reserve. It has a 120 meter water resistance, and it is a true loomed sports watch, so we may as well do a loom shot here. This is designed to be your everyday carry. Fully loomed, automatic, swimmable with a screw-down crown, and again, 120 meters water resistant. This is a real sports piece. In stainless steel, you also get a watch from H. Moser & C, which is a complete manufacturer, makes only 1,500 watches a year, and they're located in Schaffhausen, producing considerably fewer watches annually than that other Swiss manufacturer in Schaffhausen. Okay, we did a loom shot once. Let's do a second one. This is going to be a good follow-up. Can you guess? Do you already know? I think a lot of you guys already know. Fully loomed bezel, moisture indicator, diamond index at 12, and of course, Blancpain 50 Fathoms. This is the Hodinkee limited edition at 250 pieces. Now, it is a lovely watch, and in many regards, it is a follow-up to the previous mil-spec, but let's talk about how Hodinkee has changed that model. First, 250 pieces, no more, so the edition number changed, and it got lower. You can see the case is entirely satinated, and the bezel as well. There's no Blancpain logo on the sides. This is designed to evoke those first mil-spec models as they would have been launched back in 1959. The dial is matte, bare, devoid of a date, so that's a big change right there. And you can also see that it's all printed features. It has a functional moisture indicator that will change color as the originals would have if moisture intrudes into the case. But what I like here is that they kept it luxury. You can see that the watch still includes a lovely cambered sapphire on the bezel that allows the entirety of the bezel to be loomed, because the sapphire being as hard as it is, nothing can break through to the loom and chip it off. The dial, of course, features lovely white varnished hands that stand out dramatically. All of this 300 meters water resistant. Let's hear the bezel one more time. This is Grand Seiko, this is Rolex level bezel refinement. I would also throw the Cartier Calibre de Cartier diver in there. If you want the best combination of crisp feel and refinement, the sense that the bezel cost money, this is where you want to put your money. Now, it does have a display case back, and I can assure you it's the caliber 1151, which is the 1150 Frédéric Piguet. It has a 100-hour power reserve. It is a high horology hand-decorated movement with a silicone anti-magnetic hairspring. And again, this watch being 300 meters water resistant, it's ready for fun and the sun starting now. Whether for a weekend getaway or for the spring and summer months to come, this is a watch that wears easy on a small wrist, and I'm going to show you that to good effect. I'm not going to buckle down the NATO, but you can see it's nowhere near the edge of my wrist. Do better little poising shot right here. You can see that this is a compact watch, 40.3 millimeters in stainless steel. It's a lot smaller than the reference 5015. This is the reference 5008. That's the case basis. And it's only 13.3 millimeters thick without the NATO style strap. And I have to say, this is one of the best NATOs you're going to encounter, as it features Blancpain hardware, and it seems to have a thicker and more rugged material. You know what? Maybe we could even do a case back shot here. Why not, right? We love high horology, and what's a decorated movement if you can't see it? Blancpain is ready for you to call it, and if you call, they answer. Twin mainspring barrels, 6-position adjustment, nicely decorated in every respect. There is a caseback sticker on this one, so it's very fresh, and the imagery is considerably crisper if you remove the sticker, which I'm not even going to do. You guys are going to have the right of first night. This is an awesome piece. That said, since that was the Hodinkee limited edition for Blancpain, we're on a bit of a Hodinkee roll here. Let's talk about a model they launched last year. This is the SBGM 239, 39.5 millimeters in stainless steel. This is the Grand Seiko GMT automatic for Hodinkee, a watch with a lovely twilight blue dial and subdued silver tones for both the second time zone hand as well as the numerals and indices themselves. This is a lovely historically themed watch that uses what Grand Seiko calls the 3180 or the heritage case. It harks back to the original 1960 Grand Seiko, which used caliber 3180. So instead of something a little bit more contemporary, like a modern interpretation of the 62 GS or the 44 or even the 9S shape, this one is lovely round. The lugs are sharply broken out, and then they're relatively spindly and spare. This is designed to look like a vintage watch. It's a 500-piece limited edition for the US market. The twilight blue dial with the silver add-ons, very, very handsome. It's not broad across the wrist, which means you can wear it on a smaller wrist. It's a good-looking watch with an automatic winding 3-day power reserve, and it's designed to run no worse than -3 + 5 seconds per 24 hours. Remember, a COSC chronometer is +6 -4. Good stuff. So in addition to a 3-day power reserve, you get 12 and 24-hour independently settable time zones, and of course you get a date and hacking or stop seconds. The movement is good looking. You can see on the reverse side. I'm all about put up or shut up. I like to show these movements and admire the fact that Grand Seiko adjusts to 6 positions. Remember, the chronometer standard is only 5 positions of adjustment. Good looking movement. The interesting thing about Grand Seiko is they make everything. They make the case, the bracelet, the movement, the dial, the sapphire, even the shock protection springs and the lubricants themselves. This is a Zaratsu polished case, which means it's been black polished against a spinning tin plate, a technique that takes 3 years to master. The tin plate is held against the surface to be milled, creating what would be called noir or black polish, a mirrored optically smooth finish that you'll typically see on very small parts of very expensive Swiss movements. Here, Grand Seiko gives you a full hand-finished case and a hand-finished dial. As you can see, these gem-like faceted indices and hands. Look at the hands, razor sharp on their facets, polished on their facets, satin finished on their tops. Grand Seiko has artisans who use diamond-tipped micrometric milling tools to just make these little parts all day long. They are specialist constructions, and they are gorgeous works of art and sculpture in their own right. So you have a handmade dial, hand-finished case, and a watchmaker assembled and watchmaker regulated movement. And again, you're going to pay considerably less than $10,000 for a watch like this. That's real value from Grand Seiko, which, if you're counting and keeping track, makes about 45,000 watches a year. That said, the Seiko empire is vast, and making its debut on weekend watches is the Credor brand, long considered something of a running mate and occasionally positioned above Grand Seiko in the corporate hierarchy. Credor is a fascinating brand that is relatively rare, with few models available internationally, but considerably larger in the Japanese domestic market. And this model right here, the Credor Spring Drive GCLP 995, is a 38mm stainless steel Japanese domestic market timepiece that wears considerably more compact and elegant than many of Grand Seiko's international offerings. At 38mm and less than 10mm thick, this is a really nice watch. Now, on a full bracelet, it can be sporty, and it does have a little bit of a sporty flair to it, but it's also designed to be formal, to fit underneath a tight cuff, to be understated, to be minimalist. And you can see even the bracelet has been crafted thin, but exquisitely faceted, polished, satinated, and detailed. No detail overlooked, and I should mention, this is a thin watch because this is a rare manual wind spring drive caliber. The dial is just as beautifully built as on the 239, but you can see right here with the 995, the dial is understated, silver sunburst, minimalist indices, blued steel hand at center for the seconds, and note it has been rolled on a miniature rolling pin to arc underneath the sapphire. The dial does feature a double-digit date with lovely champagne date discs. There is a power reserve indicator, manual wind. You can see on the reverse side, caliber 7R87A, a beautifully made tribute to what Credor does best, thin profiles and elegant construction. You'll note that the bridge architecture is considerably more intricate and complex than what you'll find on a standard, especially standard automatic winding spring drive. The watch is simply gorgeous, distinctive, and anywhere outside of Japan, exceptionally rare. It does have a quick set date, it does have hacking seconds, it's got both of those, and it is a wonderful pleasure to operate, own, and wear a watch like this, especially since no matter where you are in the world, unless you're in the islands of Japan, this is going to be an extreme and exclusive rarity. That said, if you want something silver dial, full bracelet, stainless steel, and perhaps a little bit more endemic to the Western watch scene, there's always the old standby from Louis Cartier. And in 1904, Louis Cartier created the first Cartier wristwatch and the first ever pilot's watch for his friend Alberto Santos Dumont of Brazil. Santos Dumont at the time was an aviator, but a dirigible aviator, an airship pilot. And like his counterpart in Germany, Count von Zeppelin, there was a necessary evil with the airship. They were a handful, quite literally. While they were able to perhaps provide safer aviation in a day when internal combustion engines and heavier than air flight were rather risky, at the same time the size of an airship required that the aviator keep both hands on the controls. Thus, a watch was necessary that would never need to be fished out of a pocket when hands were scarce, and thus the strap watch or wristwatch was born, because even with your hand on the lever or wheel of a dirigible, you can still look at your wrist and gauge the time. And that's exactly where the Santos came from, Santos Dumont. Now, the watch has evolved over the years, most recently being redesigned in 2018. The new Santos, and this is the Santos Large, reclaiming some of the previous sports watch street cred of this model, but also replacing some of what we loved about the discontinued Cartier Roadster. First, the fit is beautiful. At 9.1 millimeters thick, it's a nice flat watch. A sports watch, yes, but it'll also fit underneath the cuff. It's a Cartier with a silver dial. It can absolutely be your dress watch. 47.7 millimeters lug to lug. The watch is approximately 39.9 millimeters from side to side, including the crown guards. Now, what I love about this watch is that it's got so many features for the money. You've got a combination of a case that is 100 meters water resistant, a manufacture movement, stop seconds, quick set, 42-hour power reserve. You've got a paramagnetic ring around the movement, and Cartier has been let it known through their dealers and through their spokesman. It was not part of the original press releases with the watch, but they've let it be known that this watch has been tested and effectively resisted 1200 Gauss, which is actually not just mil Gauss, it is mil Gauss plus 200. Remember, mil Gauss or mil Gauss is 1000 Gauss, a unit for measuring magnetism. So this watch is anti-magnetic at a level many would associate with technicians' watches, not dress watches, and certainly not run-of-the-mill sports watches. So it's automatic winding, manufacture movement, 100 meters water resistant, anti-magnetic, and it's got the wonderful Smart Link and Quick Switch system. So you've got the ability to quickly pop the bracelet off the case. This was inherited from the Roadster. I mentioned that the Roadster contributed to this watch's design, and it does so in the Quick Switch system. The watch comes with a strap in leather that you can use to quickly swap out and change the look of the watch. The timepiece also features what's known as Smart Links. So you can see these little tabs inside the links. Well, there's lots of them on both sides. They allow you to quickly and easily remove links from the bracelet. Now, I don't quite have enough nail to do that quickly, but there we go right here. You can see how I took the bracelet apart using only my fingernail. I tapped it, this popped out, and the nice thing is they really thought of everything. You can't pull the bar all the way out, so you can't quickly and easily lose those parts. They stay together. It's super simple to size this watch without tools, to change the strap or the bracelet without tools. All of that, and you've got a drop-in replacement for the ETA 2892A2 inside in the caliber 1847 MC. This is one of the best sports watches you can buy at any price, and in my opinion, it is Cartier's best watch. If you're considering Moser, If you're considering FP Journe, you need to consider a brand that builds under 1,000 watches every year. You need to consider Arnold and Son. The brand of integrated manufacturer La Jouperet of La Chaux-de-Fonds, this Arnold and Son high horology mark is probably the most underrated brand in the entire Swiss watch scene. And I mean, this brand is so underrated, it makes Glasuta Original look like Rolex in terms of its billing. What are you getting here? Well, aside from the rarity, less than 1,000 made per year, you're getting a watch of extraordinary quality. This is the TES Tourbillon Échappement Saphir. It is a watch with a tourbillon regulator, a manual wind caliber 8100 with an 80-hour power reserve, guilloche cut maillot or nickel copper zinc base plate, and that guilloche rendering on both sides of the base plate. Entirely open with separate bridges for the train. There's a sapphire bridge over the mainspring barrel at the top of the dial, and you can see everything as it happens while you wind and set this watch. It has a 1-minute tourbillon that beats away at 21.6, and we'll get as close as possible. You can see that the entire tourbillon carriage, as well as the bridge, has been black polished to a mirrored shine. Now you can see why it's called black polish. At every angle except one, black polish will look black, hence the nomenclature en français, palais noir. You can also see that the pegs used to locate bridges have themselves been black polished. And let's talk about screws. The best watches, bar none, will give you screws that feature black polished tops and then chamfered circumference and slots. So if you take your optics, your 10 power, 12 power, 20 power loop, and you inspect these parts, you can see that they have been micrometrically hand finished universally. The tourbillon carriage is gorgeous, but the watch is beautiful on both sides. On the reverse side, you can see that an intricately hand-finished, beveled and satinated keyless works, as well as motion works, allows you to easily observe the setting of the watch, as well as the winding of the watch. The barrel is open, which serves as a sort of informal power reserve, as you can see how tightly coiled the mainspring is. And again, did I mention that both sides of the main plate are guilloche cut? They're made of maillot, which is the French-Swiss way of describing what Lange would call German silver. It's the same material. Now, the watch is 44 millimeters in diameter, and it debuted in 2014 at Baselworld. But don't be deceived. This is a compact watch that wears as easily as a 40 millimeter timepiece. How can I prove that? Well, first, thickness. The watch is only 11 millimeters thick. That's a millimeter thinner than the thinnest version of the Rolex Daytona. From lug to lug, it's 50.5 millimeters, because Arnold and Son cases, in addition to be beautifully hand-finished, and they truly are, they also feature short, stubby, and downturned lugs that are designed to wrap around your wrist. Now, Arnold and Son is the brand owned by the manufacturer La Jouperet, which is backed by the money of Citizen Watch Group of Japan, which means this company has essentially limitless resources to develop products so they're not finicky, temperamental, or unreliable like many independent brand products are. And the company will have the money to provide parts and service forever, which is not true of many independents. This is a company on the rise and a brand you need to know. If you're interested in only one factor, quality, this is the watch you should be buying. Now, I love Vacheron Constantin of Geneva, the oldest continuously operating Swiss watch brand. Never discontinued, never on hiatus, never sold to Jean-Claude Biver for 20,000 Swiss francs as a box of patents and copyrights. Vacheron has always had a physical factory building watches since 1755. And the watch you have right here represents one of the best and rarest among sports watches issued by Vacheron for the 2015 model year with titanium matte bezel and stainless steel case. This is the 340-piece limited edition Vacheron Constantin Overseas Chronograph Generation 2. Now, you have the design that's often known by Vacheron fans as the Deep Stream. That was the nickname of the steel case with the titanium bezel in development during the late 2000s. This model features shocks of yellow varnish for the chronograph registers, and of course, you've got a lovely nickel anthracite dial to match the color of the media blasted titanium bezel, white gold hands, white gold indices, and a big eye minutes register. So you have that big eye Longines style oversized minutes register, so it's easy to see the minutes when the chronograph is running. Now, the watch is 42.5 millimeters in diameter, but it doesn't wear that large. It's only about 12.4 millimeters thick, which means a Vacheron should be a dress watch, and a dress watch should fit underneath the cuff, and this one does. It's also 25,000 ampere per meter anti-magnetic and 150 meters water resistant. Vacheron does sell a gray rubber strap for this watch, so you can quickly and easily swap out and take this watch swimming. Underneath the case back, which shows the image of the Italian naval training vessel, Americo Vespucci, you have that soft iron cage to shield the movement from magnetism, but then you have a Frederic Piguet 1185 integrated automatic high horology hand finished 5-position adjusted vertical clutch column wheel chronograph caliber. Vacheron added the double-digit date complication, and because of the column wheel you can just leave the chronograph running full-time, or excuse me, because of the vertical clutch you can leave the chronograph running full-time. You'll also note because of the vertical clutch the chronograph will start without any jump or stagger. So you can leave your chrono running full-time if you just like to have your minutes, your hours, and your seconds at center and ignore the rest of the chronograph indications. The column wheel, now we get to that part, it is the function selector. It makes for a very crisp and positive pusher, feel, and sound. You can also note that the attention to detail here is phenomenal, as the screw-down shoulders to the chronograph pushers are gray titanium, and the pushers themselves are polished steel. Small surprise and delight features like that abound on this watch, from the polished bevel that runs the length of the case and the lug hoods, to the use of screws and bars to fix the strap to the case rather than cheaper and less secure spring bars. There is an awful lot to love with this watch, and heck, let's do a loom shot, right? This is a sports watch. As you can see, Vacheron gives you plenty of lume. This is an all-the-time watch. It's your dress watch, it's your sports watch. If you're looking for one and you don't want to pay Nautilus prices, don't compromise. Go with this. Now, in the world of mainstream luxury, there are 3 Swiss brands that roll off the tongue: Rolex, Omega, and Breitling. But have you ever wondered, what is the best watch made by each? Well, Breitling's most known watch certainly is the Navitimer. Its best seller currently is the Super Ocean Heritage. Rolex is all about the Submariner historically, but the GMT, the Daytona, and the Submariner seem to be co-equally the kings of the house right now, the kings of the court at Rolex. I think Omega's best watches are the Seamaster Diver 300 meter and the gray and the dark side of the moon. And this dark side of the moon shows you why I say that. 44.25 millimeters in ceramic and sapphire. It's feather light. Launched at Baselworld 2013, it gave Omega a taste of what it's like to be Rolex for a day, as for the first year there were considerable wait lists and aftermarket markups on used examples. Today you can get these watches below retail, which is wonderful because the quality of what you get has not diminished with time, nor has the appeal of the blacked out aesthetic. Now the watch sits easy on the wrist because it's only about 50 millimeters lug to lug, which means even on my 16 centimeter circumference wrist, it's short across the wrist. I can recommend it for a wrist as small as 14 to 15 centimeters circumference. A quick note about materials: though incredibly hard and almost scratch-proof, sapphire and ceramic are very light and hypoallergenic, so in addition to being almost indelible and mark-proof, this watch is very light on the wrist. You can see that Omega goes all the way, the industrial might of Swatch Group. This is where, for example, Hublot would give you a black DLC titanium buckle because they just don't have the ability to make ceramic on this scale and make it reliable. Well, Swatch Group can make a full ceramic buckle, not just a ceramic buckle, but a ceramic pin. So when this part of the watch underneath your wrist goes desk diving and scratches around on your keyboard or desk, it's not going to scratch because it's not metal and it's not coated. And you get the same results with the case, which is remarkably resilient. A feature I love is that it's finished the same as a metal case from Omega, which means polished bevels, satin mid case, polish underside to the tachymeter. Doing this on ceramic requires incredible technical prowess, and that is what you get when you buy a watch from Omega. All of that Swatch science, muscle, R&D, and engineering on your wrist, often at a discount from list. This is a watch that features a vertical clutch and a column wheel, a direct and indirect impulse escapement called the coaxial that increases power reserve and improves precision. It has a 60-hour power reserve. The column wheel feel here is excellent. The watch also includes a mono counter with both chronograph minutes and hours on one register, so you keep a clean vintage-style twin register dial, though you get a tri-register chronograph. Take note, zirconium oxide, the dial is also made of ceramic, which gives you the aesthetic appeal of enamel, as well as the durability of enamel, but with greater resistance to fracturing over time and a lower price. The timepiece is beautifully made inside and out, and the movement, though mechanically finished, is thoughtfully designed so that the finish looks attractive, with blackened screws rather than blued or polished, and arabesque Côte de Genève. 2 mainspring barrels give you a 60-hour power reserve, and because they're twin mainspring barrels, they also help to mitigate against the loss of balance amplitude over 24 and 48 hours. That's a big problem with a single barrel movement. Note that I have a travel time function. As the watch continues to keep time, even while the chronograph continues to run, I can jump forward or backwards as I travel using the travel time function. I can even set the date in both directions. Possibly Omega's best watch. Okay. I hate showing watches in plastic because I like to wear them, and I believe watches are made to be worn. But when I have a chance to offer you a 600-piece stainless steel, no-date Patek Philippe Calatrava Pilot limited edition, I want to at least let you know what could be yours. You will have the privilege of ripping open the factory-sealed package from this factory-serviced Patek Philippe 5522A, pardon me. The 5522A debuted at the New York Patek Philippe Grand Exhibition in 2017. And it was an update on the 5524, which was white gold and a travel time function. This is very simple. A Patek Philippe Aviator with applique white gold numerals, a granular blue dial, no date, minimal printing, lovely cathedral-style hands, and half-varnished needle-style lollipop seconds hand. In other words, aesthetically speaking, this thing is the bee's knees, as pure gets. These were only offered through American market dealers, and you can see the New York Grand Exhibition ghosted logo on the inside reverse of the timepiece. It's on the inside of the sapphire. The movement is a caliber 324 with center seconds and no date, and good luck finding another version of this movement, as the center second no date 324 is about as rare in Patek watches as hen's teeth on a rooster. A very special timepiece. They went all the way with the design theme, giving you an aviator-style calfskin contrasting stitch and cross-hatched strap with a lovely counterweighted Clevis-style buckle designed to evoke the hardware on aviation suits of the first half of the 20th century. So the 5522A, 42 millimeters in steel, no date, and actually plenty of lume. Let's do a lume shot with this. I think even through the plastic, this is going to look great. There you go. It's an absolute torch. I mean, this is a Patek you can wear all the time. It's thin enough to be your dress watch. It's sporty enough to be your sports watch. All in steel. It's more scratch resistant than any platinum or gold Calatrava. And with lume like that and automatic winding, this is an ideally suited daily. I don't love the idea that I had to show you this one inside a wrapper. But then again, as we've all learned at the candy shop as kids, there's nothing more fun than opening a wrapper and enjoying what lies within. This is candy for adult tastes. All right, let's go crazy. Print style. This launched in 2017, delivered in 2018, 69 pieces in platinum, is the FP Journe Vagabondage III, part of a series that began back in 2004 with the suggestion that FP Journe take a movement he once designed for Cartier and create a commemorative watch for the anniversary of the auction house Antiquorum. This model represented the final of the 3 editions, and technically speaking, perhaps the most audacious, as it introduced a world premiere continuous jumping digital seconds. Now, you also have a jump hour, a power reserve indicator, and underneath a smoked sapphire, there is a lovely cream-colored scrolling minutes hand. The watch is an absolute ball to play with, and underneath the smoked sapphire, you can see the movement. You can see the Journe side, dial side screws, I should say, and no name, no manufacturer. The original Vagabondage used that Cartier intent movement that Journe was never able to use in a Cartier Tortue. So the shape of the movement dictated the shape of the case, but because that Cartier movement wasn't as accurate as he preferred his watches to be, he didn't put his name on it. Well, that tradition here is continued, but make no mistake, with a remontoir d'égalité constant force device maintaining constant amplitude about the balance of this solid gold movement, it is both accurate and remarkably animated, finely shaped, sized, dynamic, and as precise as a Journe watch should be. You can see the man's name proudly blazoned on the reverse side, and again, only 69 of these were made, 68 of the rose gold edition, 3 editions of the Vagabondage. Owning all 3 is one of those holy grail level goals for Journe collectors. This watch is in outstanding condition, never polished, easy to wear, 45 millimeters lug to lug, 8.1 millimeters thick, and about 38 millimeters across the case, just over 38 millimeters. I'm going to throw it on my wrist so you can see. By the way, take note, the watch includes a full matching platinum deployant clasp. Platinum clasps on Journe watches are extraordinarily uncommon and generally reserved for those who endure an upcharge at the boutique or who buy exceptional limited editions. And while this watch is an exceptional limited edition, there is always something happening on this dial. It fits underneath the cuff easily. It's a lovely and beguiling piece that will shorten meetings. You play with your watch, let everyone else yak. This is about as cool as a watch that is fundamentally just hours, minutes, and seconds can possibly get. But Grubel Forsey might beg to differ. Back in 2004, a Frenchman, Robert Grubel, and Englishman, Stephen Forsey, veterans of Audemars Piguet Renault Papy, as well as independents, at least white label, through Completime, their company that created engineering solutions for other brands, well, they finally decided to make a watch under their own name. Robert Grubel styled, Stephen Forsey engineered, and the result was the double tourbillon 30 degrees. And it is exactly what the name implies. You can see externally, Robert Grubel debuted his lovely concave profiled lugs, one of the most understated and underrated elements of Grubel Forsey design. It imparts elegance to a watch that is, in many regards, physically massive and imposing. Now you can see there's a wave-like motif on the side of the case that references the frequency of the tourbillon inside. It is 21.6 internally. We have 2 tourbillon regulators. One is making a 1-minute circuit, and it's angled at 30 degrees. The other makes a 4-minute circuit, and you can see it actually scrolls across a scale at the base of the dial. So 2 tourbillon regulators, coaxial, the escapements on the inner tourbillon, and then outboard there is a second and larger tourbillon carriage that has an enormous circumferential geared base. You can see the reverse side of the movement is paying tribute to the finest traditions of pocket watch manufacture in La Chaux-de-Fonds, where Grubel Forsey is located. Grubel, since its founding, has averaged about 100 watches a year, so exclusivity is assured. This is a company like de Bethune of L'Auberson that only creates grail watches. It doesn't bother with luxury watches. It only bothers with high horology and then only watches that would qualify as the stuff of dreams. You could see that the bridges have been beautifully frosted with a wire brush to evoke the acid-etched frosting of the pocket watch era. The anglage, you could see, is a mile wide. I'm going to do my best to show you this, but it is as broad and beautiful as you will find from Philippe Dufour. Note the use on this movement of both enormous blue fired screws and enormous black polished screws. Note that the underside of the tourbillon bridge has been entirely black polished in its own right, and that the tourbillon sits in a pivot jewel fixed by screw-fixed chaton. So you have screws holding the chaton into which the jewel is pressed. That's another nod to the pocket watch here, and you can see more golden chaton, albeit not screw-fixed, on the bridge above the mainspring barrels. This is a nod to the era when watchmaking was less precise and jewels could not be pressed directly into bridges and plates. Rather, they would be pressed into precision chaton and the chaton then into the bridges. Satination, engine turning, beveling, frosting, blued, black polished, all of that with a 3-day power reserve and a 21.6 beat rate. You have a power reserve indicator, lovely blue dial side bolts, applique rose gold indices and numerals. You can see there is a lovely quadra-spoke, almost serpentine seconds indicator that traces the scale at the bottom. And if you were to look closely at the tourbillon, I can't get super close, but you can see it well from this angle. It's angled at 30 degrees, free sprung for durability and precise adjustment, and then it includes a handmade overcoil hairspring with the combination of the double tourbillon, the 30-degree angle, the overcoil hairspring, and the 6-position adjustment. Grubel Forsey reclaims the original purpose of the tourbillon as envisioned by Abraham Louis Breguet in the late 18th century. The purpose of a tourbillon is chronometry, not peacocking. This watch delivers. Now you can see, although the watch does use the inner tourbillon as constant seconds, it also has running seconds, so it's easy to read and intuitive to do so. And then there's a power reserve indicator over at 3 o'clock. Let's throw this watch on my wrist. It's 43.5 millimeters in diameter, 15.9 millimeters thick, and just over 51 millimeters lug to lug, which means across the wrist, it's only about as broad as a Rolex Daytona on a bracelet, so though it's physically massive, imposing, and redoubtable in profile, it's also a watch you can wear on my wrist size quite easily. And if your wrist is 15 centimeters circumference, I think you're still going to wear this one nicely. We near the end. Starting with a watch that came out in 2016, and I absolutely dig this. This is the second generation Lange and Son flyback chronograph from the 1815 family. The 1815 flyback chronograph, as you can see, 39.5 millimeters and beautifully blazoned in white gold. This was the boutique edition that reclaimed a lot of the beauty of the original 2004 to 2008 1815 chrono. You can see the return of an outboard scale and lovely blue tones on the silver base. The dial is made of sterling silver, so it is itself precious metal inside the white gold case. Now, the thing about this watch is, technically speaking, it's just as audacious as the dotograph, but in the absence of a power reserve indicator and a double date, it can be much, much thinner on the wrist. It is a flyback chronograph. It does have hacking or stop seconds, and fundamentally speaking, we have the same 60-hour power reserve manual wind movement that you'll find in the Dado. Let's get a little bit closer and enjoy that which Lange hath wrought. In Saxony, East Germany, at Glashütte, they create beautiful things. And as with Grubel Forsey, the idea is to give a nod and a wink, an acknowledgement to the pocket watch era of Saxon watchcraft. You can see the bridges here are German silver or nickel copper zinc, which gives them that golden hue thanks to the copper. Everything that's silver is actually stainless steel. So the chronograph components, the levers, the horns, the recentering hammer, the clutch itself, all that is steel. The steel is either black polished, and you can see the column wheel truly is, or it's satinated. And you can see all of the levers, the horns, and the yoke of the chronograph are satinated on the top, and then you can see on the edge mirror beveled, and that is not easy to do on steel. We have a lot of jewels set in chaton on this watch, and you can see all of those golden chaton featuring the pivot jewels. They are fixed by blued screws. Note we have both polished and blued screws here. Both. The bluing is done in a kiln by firing and oxidation. Note that the clutch itself features multiple sharp inward and outward angles where bevels actually meet at a point or fold inward to an acute angle, finishing those particular details along with black polish, one of the two most difficult arts in watch finishing. Now, the watch, of course, beats away at a stately 18,000 vibrations per hour, so in that regard, it's a lot like a pocket watch. But you can also see that the balance itself is huge. It's a variable inertia, free-sprung balance, and those little blocks on the rim are used to adjust the polar moment. Lesser or greater, that adjusts the turning force, which in turn allows the Lange watchmaker to regulate the watch without moving the fine adjustment index, which is primarily there for super fine adjustments. The watch is adjusted in 5 positions, which is the high horology and chronometer standard. And if you look just below the regulator, you could see the curve of the overcoil hairspring. Very few Lange watches, as with FP Journe watches, very few include overcoil hairsprings, a deluxe feature made by hand and laboriously hand curved on a template to allow the watch to breathe concentrically. The hairspring will develop concentrically in any position with respect to gravity, giving it the ability to keep excellent and even time in any position. Now, once again, flyback chronograph, 60-hour power reserve, stop seconds, black polish run amok, Glashütte stripes across the bridges, engine turning on the base plate, and freehand engraving on the half bridge for the balance. That's done with a burin manually and freehand, so absolutely no lathes used to create these patterns. This is an extensively handmade watch, physically impressive, though not intimidating. At under 40 millimeters, with a compact case, it's the anti-dotograph, less relentlessly technical, a little bit more poetic, and definitely thinner in profile. This is a very special watch. That said, sometimes more is more. Launched in 2013, this, also from the 1815 family, is the Rattrapant Perpetual calendar. It is a perpetual calendar. It is a split-second chronograph. It has a power reserve indicator at 12 o'clock, all of that, and it is a very, very, very special watch. Made of platinum, it's 41.9 millimeters in diameter, and it too has a sterling silver dial. The moon phase disc at Lange is not made of brass, it's made of gold, and in this case, white gold. You can see on my wrist, the watch is absolutely, I don't know what to say. Gorgeous, imposing, intimidating, technically proficient, artistically accomplished, Rare? It's all of those things. Just consider what it would take to put a Patek Philippe 5204P on your wrist. Now, consider what it would take to put this on your wrist. Remember, price is in the description below. Full deployant clasp. Remember, I mentioned this is rare on Lange watches. This watch comes with it standard. Turn everything over, and we've got caliber L101. Now, you can see we have the freehand engraving here too, but we also have 631 parts, which means you're getting a heck of a lot more than if you were simply buying a dado or an 1815 chronograph. Note not one, but two column wheels. You have the center bridge architecture with twin pincers framing a wheel directly connected to the second or split second hand. There's also a decoupler. This is used by the absolute best split seconds chronographs from Lange and Patek to prevent the chronograph system from dragging and slowing the movement when you do have that chronograph seconds hand stationary. Turning it over, taking one last look, you can see that everything is intricately finished, but there's a lot more. This is next level compared to the 1815. It has greater depth about it. You don't just look down and into it. You can look diagonally through it from any angle and appreciate that Lange absolutely exhausted its options for decoration and complexity. This is East German watchmaking at the state, quite honestly, of the art. If this isn't art, I don't know what art is. Guys, reach out to me directly, tmosso@thewatchbox.com, for purchase and pricing details.